Hey strangers, just a quick reminder that if you want early ad-free episodes, there are 2 ways to go about it. 1, you can subscribe with Apple Podcasts, but the better way is to subscribe at GrabBag Collab. For about the same price as Apple, around $5 a month, you'll get early ad-free Strange, plus my 2 other podcasts, Dear Daisy and Shut the F Up Nick Lachey, a Love is Blind recap podcast, as well as Amber Hunt's Crimes of the Centuries and What If They're Wrong, the new version of her Pulitzer Prize-winning podcast Accused, and new quarterly special shows all the time. GrabBag is a small, women and non-binary owned network. Supporting us means you're supporting a small business with transparent operations and profit sharing among all creators. All our creators get to keep their shows, unlike big networks that own their creators' IP. We are so proud of the work we're doing at GrabBag, and we'd love for you to come share in the love. But you can also support the show for $0 by making sure you're subscribed and that your episodes automatically download. You can set your phone to delete the download after a certain number of days so it doesn't take up needed space. But download numbers are the way advertisers know if they want to buy spots on the show or not, and that is, unfortunately, the main way I make my money. You can also leave a review, and don't forget to tell a friend about your favorite podcast of all time, Strange and Unexplained with me, Daisy Egan. Thanks so much, and enjoy the show. Where does courage come from? Is it innate or learned? Or empathy, for that matter? Can one have courage without empathy? For what makes us brave, if not empathy? What makes us step up in the way of danger, if not to protect others? And what makes us cross lines we never imagined we could in order to do so? Welcome to Strange and Unexplained with me, Daisy Egan. I like to think of myself as brave. I do tend to run toward danger rather than away, despite my stature and the fact that I am indeed a big fraidy cat. If I see someone in need, I want to help, despite any danger I may incur on myself in doing so, and even though there may indeed be nothing I can do to help. Recently, during a trip to New York City, I saw the cops giving an old man a hard time for skipping the subway fare. I was so distressed, I offered to pay the $3 for him so he could be on his way. I did this twice while waiting for my train. The officers told me not to interfere with an active investigation. Active investigation, my eye. This was an old man who probably just needed somewhere warm to sit. It wasn't until I was on the train that I realized I should have pretended he was my grandpa and thanked the officers for finding him after he'd wandered away from my family dinner. But it was too late. I was safely on my way uptown, and he was probably going to spend the night in jail for a crime that hurt absolutely no one. Instead, I spent the rest of the night worrying about him. And this, stranger, is why I can't live in New York City. Too many people hurting right there in the open for everyone to see. But, of course, there are people hurting everywhere. I have found myself late for important appointments because I saw someone fall on the sidewalk and had to pull over to help them up, and then listen to their story about how they came to be there on that sidewalk that day. Or I see someone's grocery bag break and I have to pull over to give them one of my reusable bags and help them pack it, while they insist they're okay. I cannot help myself, and it's not like I feel better after I help. Usually, I'll spend the rest of the day worrying if they're going to be okay. For me, the guilt of living with knowing I didn't do everything I could to help someone is too great. I help because I'll hate myself if I don't. Listen, I'm no sociologist or psychologist or whatever, but something that strikes me about most of these encounters is how reluctant people are to accept the help. Somewhere along the path of human evolution, we lost the plot. Helping people in need should be as instinctual as taking a breath. And accepting the help should never be considered an admission of weakness. What else are we all here for? And if you think I haven't thought about the possibility of harboring people in my attic if I have to, you don't know me, stranger. If I'm willing to run toward a black bear for no reason, you'd better believe I'd be willing to run toward an ICE agent harassing someone on the street. I know it's not safe, but apparently I can't help myself. I'd like to think that if I had been in Europe during the 1930s and 40s, I would have gotten into all kinds of hot water trying to protect innocent people from the Nazis and fascism. And I'd like to think if I'd been a teenaged girl in Holland, I would have been in cahoots with the subjects of today's episode. Train Overstegen was a badass mama. She was a communist and instilled in her two daughters, Freddie and Truus, the importance of fighting injustice. By 1939, Hitler had already laid the groundwork for war in Europe. Through his cruel policies and his hateful rhetoric, he had managed to scapegoat whole swaths of the population, including Jews, communists, Catholics, queer people, Romani people, and Black people. He had turned neighbors against each other, encouraging people to report anyone he deemed an enemy. Hitler had sowed so much distrust and fear that if one was caught trying to protect one of the many people he had targeted, one would face punishment, often imprisonment or death. Despite the danger, however, Train, who was by then divorced and raising her two girls on her own in a houseboat in the Dutch city of Haarlem, not the famed Manhattan neighborhood, harbored some Lithuanian refugees in the ship's hold. Once the war started in Europe, the small family had moved to an apartment about which, many years later, Freddie, who was about 12 or 13 years old in 1939, told Vice, quote, "We slept on straw mattresses. My mother had made those herself. I come from a very original family. We didn't have much, but my mother always figured something out." End quote. In the small flat where the two sisters shared a room to make space, the family hid refugees from Germany and Amsterdam, as well as dissidents and gay people. And for those they didn't harbor, according to a piece on the website Jacobin titled "Remembering a Dutch Partisan," quote, "The family participated in the communist-led International Red Aid, which helped Jewish and political refugees illegally cross the border between Germany and the Netherlands," end quote. When the Nazis invaded the Netherlands in 1940, Freddie and Truus joined their mother in the dangerous act of distributing anti-Nazi pamphlets and newspapers. In an interview she gave for a book titled "Under Fire: Women in World War II," Freddie said, quote, "We also glued warnings across German posters in the street calling men to work in Germany, and then we'd hurry off on our bikes," end quote. In other words, they'd post stuff that basically said, "Do not go to Germany, this is a trap," over German recruitment posters. These kinds of shenanigans could have gotten the girls killed. Fortunately, though, likely due to how young and innocent-looking the girls were, they managed to slide under the radar, for the most part. Strangers, we have a new sponsor. Brodo makes bone broths that are delicious enough to drink. My acupuncturist recommended that I switch to warmer foods, especially in the morning. So that means no more smoothies or iced coffee. Fortunately, Brodo came into my life at just the right moment. Brodo was launched by award-winning chef Marco Cano Ra. He started selling Brodo out of the side door of his East Village Manhattan restaurant 11 years ago, and now, whether you want a quick warm drink or a nourishing base for cooking, Brodo makes it easy. They ship nationwide, so you don't have to be in New York City to enjoy Chef Marco's masterpiece. And Brodo comes in 8 delicious flavors, from classic chicken to the spicy Nona to more creative blends like ginger turmeric, herb-infused, or veggie-based broths. I recommend trying their sampler pack so you can figure out for yourself what flavor is best for you. My favorite flavor so far is the Tom Yum coconut curry and lime. It is a perfect and delicious way to sip my way through a healthy morning. We also use it in our cooking, and it hits every time. A 2025 study found that amino acids in broth heal leaky guts and strengthen the immune system. When I was little, my parents always made me tortellini and Brodo. Now I know why. Shop the best broth on the planet with Brodo. Head to brodo.com/strange for 20% off your first subscription order and use code STRANGE for an additional $10 off. Once again, that's brodo.com/strange for 20% off your first subscription order and an additional 10% off if you use my code STRANGE. turns out, the girls had indeed attracted some attention, and one afternoon in 1941, when Freddie was 14 and Trues was 16, a commander from the Harlem Resistance Group showed up at their door and asked Train if she would allow her young daughters to join the resistance. It was thought that no one would suspect such young, innocent girls of doing crimes at all, let alone crimes against the government. According to a piece in The Guardian from 2018, Train consented with one condition. Always, she told her daughters, stay human. Listen, this lady is my hero. She raised her daughters to be such little Nazi punchers that adult people came knocking on her door to ask if they could come out to play. And I'm sure she was proud, both of her daughters and her own excellent parenting, but I have to imagine she was at least a little terrified at the thought of letting her two young girls join the organized movement to take down Hitler and his roving band of psychopaths. I appreciate her advice for her girls to stay human, but one thinks perhaps, "Dear God, be careful and stay alive," might have also been a good nugget of wisdom to tuck in their little ears before sending them off to battle. Then again, that was probably every parent's daily send-off for their children in those days. Have a great day at school, and dear God, be careful and stay alive. In all seriousness, though, this was sound advice. Train knew that the kinds of things her daughters would be asked to do could wear down any grown man and turn his heart to ice. When you're fighting an enemy who thinks you're an animal, it's hard not to turn around and regard them as animals themselves. Remembering one's own humanity is the first step in remembering others. Hanny, or Joe, Schaft was raised with similar values as Trues and Freddie. According to the Dutch National Hanny Schaft website, quote, Joe was raised with values such as solidarity, justice, and equality. Her father was a teacher at the National Teacher Training College and a member of the Social Democratic Workers' Party, while her mother came from a family of socialist ministers. At the dinner table, Joe participated in discussions about world events. The ideal of a just world led her to study law. She specialized in international law and dreamed of going to Geneva to revitalize the League of Nations. End quote. At the age of 18, Hanny began studying law at the University of Amsterdam and co-founded a new society called Gemma, an acronym for a Latin phrase which translated to, "From the small things, we strive for the great." When the Nazis invaded Poland in 1940, Hanny helped deliver parcels to imprisoned Polish officers. When tensions escalated in 1940, so did Hanny's acts of resistance. She began by stealing identity cards from swimming pool lockers, theaters, concert halls, and cafes for her Jewish friends so that they might be able to access places and services generally off-limits to them. She also helped hide her Jewish friends. She began doing the same for other people outside of her friend circle and also collected and sent donations to deported Jews. It is hard to overstate how dangerous all this work was. Any one of these things could have landed Hanny in jail, or worse. Hanny and almost every member of Gemma were forced to drop out of school in 1943 when Germany demanded all university students sign an oath of loyalty to the Nazi Party. According to that same website about her, quote, ultimately 85% of students in the Netherlands refused the loyalty declaration, end quote. That's a massive show of solidarity. One wonders what would happen here in the States if college students were forced to sign a pledge of loyalty to any political leader in order to continue their studies. It's hard to imagine, but so are a lot of things happening today. Also, given the state of student loans, I imagine a lot of people would be like, let me see, take an oath pledging allegiance to this lunatic and take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt I'll likely never be able to pay off? I'm good, thanks. That same year, 1943, the occupying forces responded to a strike call from the Resistance Council by executing more than 100 people and deporting nearly 1,000. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what deporting means in this instance. I don't know to where they were deported, but I have to assume they were deported to Hitler's death camps. This was the turning point for Hanny. she managed to get in contact with the resistance movement and officially joined the fight. Her first assignment was to meet up with Trues and Freddie. Together, the three young women would become a lethal trio. Strangers, I'm so excited to tell you about our sponsor, Avocado Green Mattress. Their certified organic mattresses are specifically designed to relieve pressure points, support your body the way it needs, and help you actually get the deep, restorative sleep you've been missing. Every mattress is made with thoughtfully sourced materials and built with real care, so you get incredible sleep night after night. You know I take my sleep seriously, and I know that the foundation of sleep starts with a supportive, comfortable, and intentionally made mattress. Avocado has comfort and support you can feel. Their mattresses are designed to provide both comfort and proper support, helping your body stay aligned while feeling cozy and relaxing to sleep on. Plus, all their products are made with real certified organic materials, so they don't just feel better. They can provide better support, breathability, and durability over time. That's a great investment in your sleep. Durable products means fewer replacements over time, helping reduce unnecessary waste, which is one of the most sustainable choices you can make. Their solid wood bed frames, like the City bed frame, are crafted with durable materials and timeless design, bringing quality and sustainability into your bedroom. Avocado products are made, not manufactured, thoughtfully, crafted with real materials to deliver lasting comfort and support. Go to avocadogreenmattress.com/strange to check out their mattress and furniture sale. That's avocadogreenmattress.com/strange, avocadogreenmattress.com/strange. By the time Hanny joined the group, Trues and Freddie had already carried out quite a few impressive and extremely dangerous acts of resistance. And just a quick word before we continue, we're talking about war here, so some of this stuff is going to be pretty brutal. As per usual, I'll do my best to remain respectful and not go into gruesome detail, but it is important for us to remember that the people the Nazis targeted, brutalized, and murdered were real, everyday people. In one instance, Trues and Freddie flirted with some guards at a warehouse being used by the Nazis. With the guards distracted, they set fire to the warehouse, burning it down. The girls would be assigned a target, whether it was a collaborator or a high-level member of the SS, and they would lure the man into the woods with the promise of sex. Once in the woods, another member of the resistance would shoot the target dead. Freddie later told Vice of one such killing that her sister helped carry out. Quote, Trues had met him in an expensive bar, seduced him, and then took him for a walk in the woods. She was like, "Want to go for a stroll?" And of course he wanted to. Then they ran into someone, which was made to seem a coincidence, but he was one of ours, and that friend said to Trues, "Girl, you know you're not supposed to be here." They apologized, turned around, and walked away. And then shots were fired. So that man never knew what hit him. They had already dug the hole, but we weren't allowed to be there for that part. End quote. According to a piece in The Guardian, quote, the sisters regarded the killings as a grim necessity that was secondary to their more important work, rescuing children. The two helped smuggle Jewish children through the Netherlands, sometimes even as bombs fell from Allied aircraft overhead. End quote. The girls, of course, had moral qualms over their roles in the killings, either direct or indirect. But justification came by way of the horrific things the girls witnessed in the years leading up to and during the war. Watching Nazis grab innocent people off the street, line them up against walls, and execute them right there, out in the open, for everyone to see. Freddie, who was the smallest of the three girls, was usually tasked with being a scout since she would raise the least suspicion. But she, like the other two girls, was tasked with transporting weapons, sabotaging operations, and escorting Jewish children to safe houses. It was during one of these missions to escort Jewish children to safety that Trues experienced something that would weigh her down for the rest of her life. While moving a group of children across a meadow at night, the group was somehow spotted by Nazis who opened fire indiscriminately with their machine guns and mowed the children down. Truce survived the attack with an even stronger conviction for her work in the resistance. The courage it took these young women while their friends and comrades were captured and executed around them. Once the girls were given permission, or perhaps it was just their own courage, to kill, they did so with ruthlessness. In her book Seducing and Killing Nazis, author and historian Sophie Poldermans quotes Truce recalling, quote, "Once I was confronted with an SS soldier, a Dutch SS soldier even, who was killing a small baby by hitting it against a wall. He grabbed the baby and hit it against the wall. The father and sister had to watch. They were obviously hysterical. The child was dead. I shot that guy, right there and then. That wasn't an assignment, but I don't regret it." End quote. Stranger, this kind of violence is something I had never even considered possible until I learned about the Trail of Tears here in the U.S. Now, I know it happened long before then, but that was the first account I ever read of such a thing. And even now, with everything I've learned about people, I cannot wrap my head around this. I don't know what has to happen to a person to make them capable of something like this. I don't know how one is so thoroughly stripped of one's humanity and empathy. Even if one truly believes that some group is their enemy for whatever reason, or somehow believes some group is evil or bad or undeserving of life, how does one go about doing violence to a little baby? And then, how does one go about the rest of their life like everything is okay? The girls would sometimes follow targets home and shoot them there. When asked years later how many people they liquidated, as they called it, Freddie would simply say they were soldiers, and soldiers never say how many men they killed. Hanny joined Truce and Freddie in 1943. By then, she was already well known to the Nazis for her work in the resistance. She'd been dubbed the girl with the red hair. Truce later recounted the most terrifying experience she had during the war. It was during the winter of 1944-45. She and Hanny had been tasked with blowing up a bridge. In the middle of placing explosives on the bridge, they heard Nazi soldiers approaching and hid by hanging from the underside of the bridge. Later, she would recall, quote, "We were crying, the heroines, we were completely devastated," end quote. I have to assume this meant that others in their group didn't escape capture. I imagine they would have been executed right there on the bridge with Truce and Hanny hanging on for dear life from the beams below. But fear not, stranger. According to a page devoted to Truce on the website of the Huygens Institute, a leading research voice on Dutch history, quote, "Other actions involving Schaft were more successful, such as blowing up a German train near Standpoort and the liquidation of NSB policeman Willem Zirkzee on March 1st, 1945, end quote. At some point, with Hanny already on the Germans' radar, the other two were found out. And so the three girls took measures to change their appearance and create fake identities for themselves. Hanny dyed her famously red hair black, and it was at this point where she went from being called Jo to being called Hanny. Later, Truce would recall having as many as 51 different hiding places. Despite their efforts, though, on June 6, 1944, Hanny had to go into hiding when she and another friend carried out an assassination that went wrong. On that day, Hanny and her good friend Jan Boonkamp were tasked with assassinating a police officer who turned many dissidents and Jews over to the Nazis. Hanny shot the officer off his bicycle, and Jan went in to deliver the kill shot when the officer instead shot Jan in the stomach. While at the first aid station, someone alerted the so-called security service, which was just another wing of the Nazi Party, who managed to extract details from Jan, including addresses of members of the resistance. Apparently, according to the national website devoted to Hanny, just before Jan died, someone claiming to be a friend asked him if there was anything he could do for him. Jan gave him Hanny's parents' address, hoping, I assume, the friend would let them know he'd died. Instead, of course, the friend was a Nazi collaborator and immediately turned the information over to the SS, who in turn kidnapped Hanny's parents and held them hostage in the hopes of luring Hanny out of hiding. Hanny almost did come out to rescue her parents, but it was Trues and Freddie who told her that the Nazis wouldn't let her parents go even if she did turn herself in. Oddly enough, though, after some time, they did release Hanny's parents even without her coming out of hiding. And now, of course, with her parents being watched, Hanny couldn't visit them once she did come out of hiding, which she eventually did do. As soon as she came out of hiding, Hanny went right back to work with the resistance because, fuck Nazis. According to the Hanny Shaft website, the three young women, quote, carried out attacks on at least 8 collaborators. Not all of these attacks were successful. Sometimes multiple attempts were made by different resistance groups. Hanny participated in a failed assassination attempt against 3 leading members of the Harlem police. The resistance members, including Hanny, were injured in the attempt, and she had to recuperate at another hiding place. Hanny, Trues, and Freddie refused to carry out actions that victimized innocent people. For example, they refused to kidnap children, end quote. And then, on March 21, 1945, Hanny failed to return from an assignment transporting papers and a pistol. She'd been held at a checkpoint when officers were suspicious of her red roots. Wow, that dye job was working overtime. Maybe it just goes to show how myopic people are, that all this woman had to do was dye her hair black and seriously no one recognized her anymore. It's hard to fathom how much stress Hanny was under that she either didn't think or maybe didn't have time to re-dye her roots, or that she took off her cap at the most inopportune moment. In the movie version of her life, which incidentally did get made in the 80s, I haven't watched it because I can't find it anywhere, not even my library has it. I imagine she's already had her papers inspected at the checkpoint, and just as she's crossing through, she removes her cap to wipe the sweat from her brow, and an officer is like, "Wait! One moment! What is these red roots? Why, you are not indeed who you say you are? I see now you are the girl with the red hair. Take her away!" Listen, if we can't poke fun at Nazis, who can we poke fun at? While she was being held, she told the Nazis of all her victories, including an attack on an officer named Ko Langendijk. This confession prevented the execution of 5 women being held hostage. Members of the resistance tried to rescue Hanny, including Trues, who disguised herself as a nurse to try to gain entry to the prison, but by then it was already too late. Despite an agreement made between the occupiers and the resistance that said there would be no more executions, quote, on April 17, 1945, Hanny Shaft was taken from her cell by the German Matthias Schmitz and the Dutchman Martin Kuiper, who was notorious for his cruelty, among other things. Fellow prisoners heard her screams. She was taken by car to Overveen. They stopped on a dirt road near the beach. Kuiper, Schmitz, and another officer took her to the execution site. Schmitz walked behind her and fired a shot at her head, but the shot only wounded her. Kuiper then fired his machine gun until she fell dead. They hastily buried her in the dunes. End quote. It was 3 weeks before Europe was freed from Hitler's occupation. Legend has it that when the first shot failed to kill her, she responded by saying, "I'm a better shot." This is probably not true, but I like to believe it is. The Nazis considered Hanny a terrorist. Fun fact, the Romans considered Jesus to be a terrorist. Trues and Freddie Oversteegen both went on to live long lives. Freddie would later say she dealt with her grief and trauma by getting married and having babies. But, according to the History Channel's website, quote, the experience of war still caused her insomnia. In another interview, Freddie recalled seeing a person she'd shot fall to the ground and having the human impulse to want to help him. End quote. Freddie's son would later tell The Guardian, quote, "She shot a few people, and these were the real bad guys. But she hated it, and she hated herself for doing it," end quote. Freddie always remembered to be human. She died on September 5th, 2018, at 92 years old. Truus married a comrade from the resistance and did some activism for the Communist Party. She too had children, one of whom she named Hanny, and eventually learned to deal with her trauma through art. She became a sculptor. She died on June 18th, 2016, at 92 years of age. Despite her death at a young age, or perhaps because of it, Hanny Schaft became the most well-known of the trio. She was reburied with proper honors at the Dutch Honorary Cemetery with members of the Dutch government and Queen Wilhelmina and Prince Bernhard in attendance. Queen Wilhelmina called Hanny the symbol of the resistance. However, just 6 years later, in 1952, when the Communist Party organized the first commemoration for Hanny Schaft, the government banned the demonstration and a police force, backed by tanks, was sent in to disperse the crowd. It's worth remembering that the Dutch royal family were Nazi sympathizers for a while until that wasn't working in their favor, at which point they joined the opposition. It seems that in the years after the war, they started leaning back toward their initial position. A weird take, if you ask me, because fuck Nazis. After the war was over, Prince Bernhard was like, yeah, fuck the Nazis, I guess, but also, some of their policies were pretty great. According to the Jacobin piece, quote, "There are still rumors that members of Truus' fighting unit were deliberately turned over to the Nazis. Even though definitive proof of this has never been provided, the Menger-Oversteegen sisters experienced firsthand how Bernhard's men would send communist operatives on life-threatening missions that were actually smuggling operations that benefited the new resistance's rich commanders," end quote. These developments were all pretty devastating for Truus and Freddie, who'd hoped their work in the resistance, for which they could have been killed, like Hanny and so many of their friends and comrades, would have led to a worldwide swing to the left. Instead, they got the Cold War and continued operations against the Communist Party and anyone in it. Nonetheless, Truus founded the National Hanny Schaft Commemoration Foundation, whose website states, quote, "The goals of the work were clear from the outset: to fight fascism, racism, and discrimination. Freedom and equality against exclusion were her motto. Truus also initiated the establishment of a children's home for disabled children in Soweto, South Africa," end quote. Freddie's granddaughter would later write, quote, "But for people like Truus or my grandmother, the experience of the occupation was about much more than the loss of national independence. They fought not only for the liberation of the Netherlands, but also for a completely different Netherlands in a different world. For this, they were long sidelined by the good patriots," end quote. It wasn't until 2014 that Truus and Freddie received honors for their work in the resistance, when they were both awarded the War Mobilization Cross at the ages of 88 and 90. And despite all of her heroism and acts of selfless bravery, what Freddie remembered most was the violence around her. She told Vice in 2016, quote, "I think about the fact that a lot of people have fallen. I remember how people were taken from their homes. The Germans were banging on doors with the butts of their rifles. That made so much noise, you'd hear it in the entire neighborhood. And they would always yell. It was very frightening," end quote. Upon her death, Freddie's son Remy told The Observer, quote, "If you ask me, the war only ended 2 weeks ago. In her mind, it was still going on and on and on. It didn't stop, even until the last day," end quote. By this show's nature, murder falls within the realm of strange and unexplained because, well, it's immoral. What brings a human being to kill, and then go on living with themselves after? We've already touched on the immoral horrors of the Nazis many times on this podcast. We've even traced their through line to certain international leaders today and updated it for your listening ears. Talk about a war that doesn't stop. You can find our updated version of the episode Here Come the Brown Shirts not too far back in this feed. Anyway, history has shown us time and time again that when the world reaches a fever pitch of conflict, morality is thrown out the window, not only by vigilante killers like Hanny, Trues, and Freddy, but by entire governments. Killing unfolds when the powers that be break the dam of violence. All of a sudden, the very foundation of an environment once known as home becomes unsafe, and the only thing we have to keep us safe is each other. I picture True's and Freddie's upbringing surrounded by strangers taking shelter in their home. Their mother was called to look after her community in this way, and that must have left an impression that drove them forward. What's more moral than opening your door and protecting life together? And what's the difference between that and bravely stepping out and killing a part of the murder machine yourself? Maybe the difference isn't the point, when both are needed for a truly moral cause, just trying to survive genocide. Next time on Strange and Unexplained. Look, it's an ape, it's a moose, it's a snowy owl. The fantastic tale of the Dover Demon. Strange and Unexplained is a production of Three Goose Entertainment and Grab Bag Collab. This episode was written by me, Daisy Egan, with research by Joe Gordette, editorial help from Becca DiGregorio, and sound engineering and design by Jeff Devine. If you have an idea for an episode or want to submit a question for an Ask Me Anything episode, head to strangeandunexplainedpod.com and fill out the contact form. I will write back. Eventually. I need an assistant. You can follow me on social media at Daisy Egan or follow the show at SNU Pod and Grab Bag Collab. Stay strange.